There is a resource beneath the earth that has accomplished something no army, no treaty, and no empire ever quite managed. It has made certain nations untouchable, not invincible, not immortal. Untouchable in a way that makes even the most powerful countries on earth stop and think before they move. That resource is oil. And the story of who controls it, how they use it, and what it really means for global power is one of the most consistently misread stories of the modern era. But here's what nobody tells you. The most powerful weapon in the world today is not a missile. It's not a nuclear warhead. It's not an aircraft carrier. It's a pipe in the ground. And by the end of this video, you'll never look at a gas station the same way again. We spend enormous energy analyzing military budgets. We debate nuclear arsenals. We track diplomatic alliances and trade agreements. But underneath all of that, running quietly, like an engine in a basement nobody visits, is a simpler and more uncomfortable question. Who sits on top of the fuel the world cannot function without? Because the most dangerous kind of power has never been the kind that announces itself loudly. It's the kind that simply waits, the kind that knows with absolute patience that the world needs it more than it needs the world. And right now, in the middle of one of the most dangerous confrontations the Middle East has seen in decades, one nation is proving this with a clarity that should make every financial historian sit up straight. But before we get there, we need to go back, much further back. For most of recorded history, power meant land. Control enough territory, feed enough soldiers, and you could project force across the known world. Then came the Industrial Revolution, and land alone stopped being enough. Coal powered the first great industrial empires, Britain, Germany, the United States, not by accident but by geology. The nations sitting on coal became the dominant forces of their age. But coal had limits. Then in the late 19th century, engineers began extracting something that would redraw the entire map of global influence. Liquid petroleum. Lighter than coal, more energy dense, and movable anywhere on Earth by pipe or tanker. From the moment the first serious commercial wells began pumping, the world crossed a threshold it could never recross. And here's the part that changes everything. From that moment forward, military strength alone was no longer enough to guarantee survival. What guaranteed survival was geology, and a willingness to use it. The 20th century demonstrated this with brutal clarity. October 1973. The Arab oil embargo begins. The United States, the most powerful military civilization in human history, finds itself genuinely helpless, not invaded, not defeated, just cut off. Within weeks, fuel prices quadrupled. Lines stretched for miles at gas stations across America. The economy stalled. Inflation surged in ways the Federal Reserve struggled to contain for years afterward. The president of the most powerful nation on earth went on television to ask citizens to turn down their thermostats. All of it. Because of oil. That single event told the world something it had been slow to understand. That in the modern economy, the nation controlling energy controls everything downstream from it. Manufacturing, transportation, agriculture, military logistics, heating, cooling. Every node of modern civilization runs on petroleum. Disrupt the oil and you don't just raise prices. You reach into the engine of everything. This was not a lesson that went unlearned, especially not by one particular nation sitting on reserves that the entire world would spend the next 50 years trying and failing to neutralize. Now, I want to ask you something directly. Think about every major oil-producing nation on Earth. Think about the ones that joined Western alliances, hosted foreign military bases, invited international oil companies to manage their fields, nations that traded sovereignty for security, nations whose petroleum wealth became so entangled with the Western financial system that true independence became structurally impossible. Now think about which nation refused. Which nation looked at that arrangement and decided the price of true independence, sanctions, isolation, decades of hostility from the most powerful bloc on earth, was worth paying rather than surrender control of the one thing it held absolutely? Which nation, cut off from global banking, surrounded by adversaries with far superior conventional military hardware, still managed to project power across an entire region and sit at negotiating tables as something closer to an equal than a supplicant? Here's your question, and I want you to think about it carefully before we continue. In your opinion, which country in the world is the richest in oil and controls its wealth entirely on its own? One country, sanctioned for decades, isolated from the global banking system, surrounded by enemies, and yet still standing, still negotiating, still projecting power across an entire region. The answer might surprise you, or it might confirm exactly what you already suspected. It's Iran. Iran holds approximately 9% of the world's proven oil reserves, the fourth largest concentration on the planet. Its natural gas reserves rank second globally, but the size of the reserves is almost beside the point. Most petrostates followed a recognizable path. Extract the oil, sell it in dollars, park those dollars in Western financial institutions, buy Western military hardware. The result was prosperity and dependence arriving simultaneously. Comfortable enough to maintain domestic stability, but so deeply integrated into the Western-led order that genuine independence became structurally impossible. Iran, after 1979, chose differently. The Islamic Revolution didn't simply change the government. It cut the financial threads connecting Iranian petroleum wealth to the Western banking system. Deliberately and completely. The consequences were severe: sanctions, isolation, a devastating 8-year war with Iraq during which Western governments quietly supported the other side, and yet Iran survived, more than survived. Here's what nobody in mainstream media wants to explain. How exactly does a nation survive decades of the most comprehensive sanctions regime in modern history and still project power across 4 countries simultaneously? The answer has everything to do with one thing. And it's not ideology. Here is what most conventional analysis of Iran misses entirely. Tehran's petroleum reserves have never functioned purely as an economic asset. They have been the foundation of a strategic doctrine built around a single insight. In a world structurally addicted to oil, the nation willing to weaponize its reserves rather than simply monetize them occupies a category of power that conventional military comparison cannot capture. Iran cannot match American naval power in open ocean. It cannot match Israeli precision in aerial operations. None of that is the point. What Iran holds is physical control over the Strait of Hormuz, a waterway barely 30 kilometers wide that carries roughly 20% of all oil traded globally every single day. Think about that number, 20% of all oil every day, through 30 kilometers of water that Iran can see from its own coastline. The threat does not need to be exercised to function. Its existence alone reshapes the risk calculations of every nation whose economy depends on those tankers arriving on schedule. Insurance premiums shift. Military planning documents in Washington, Beijing, Riyadh, and Tokyo all carry some version of the same paragraph. What happens if Iran closes the Strait? That single question is worth more to Iran than an entire fleet of aircraft carriers. Consider what Iran has absorbed without capitulating. Decades of American sanctions have excluded Iran from the SWIFT banking system, frozen assets held abroad, and made conventional oil sales extraordinarily difficult. The Iranian rial has lost catastrophic value. Ordinary Iranians have experienced genuine hardship. And yet, the Islamic Republic has not collapsed, has not abandoned its nuclear program on Western terms, has not dismantled its network of allied forces across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, has not surrendered its strategic position in exchange for relief. How? Because oil, even sanctioned oil, even informally traded oil, even oil sold through channels that bypass Western financial infrastructure entirely, is still oil. And the world still needs it badly enough that buyers consistently materialized regardless of American preferences. China imports Iranian crude at discounted prices while providing Tehran with the economic lifeline that prevents genuine collapse. Trade routes adapted, payment systems were improvised. Here is the financial truth that Washington has never fully solved. You cannot sanction a resource the world cannot replace. You can make it more expensive to buy, you can make it more difficult to sell, but you cannot make the world stop needing it. And Iran has understood this longer and more clearly than almost anyone. Now look at the current confrontation between Iran, Israel, and the United States with this framework in mind. The surface drama, strikes and counterstrikes, proxy engagements across multiple theaters, nuclear negotiations that advance and collapse, is real and genuinely dangerous. But beneath the military and political surface, the financial and energy dimension is what determines the actual shape of Iran's strategic position. Iran is not simply a military adversary. It is a nation that has spent 4 decades deliberately constructing a posture designed to make itself prohibitively expensive to destroy. Its oil provides economic resilience to absorb sustained punishment. Its control of the Strait of Hormuz provides the capacity to impose costs on the entire global economy. Its regional network extends its reach across multiple countries without requiring Iranian forces to engage directly. This is not recklessness. This is a nation that has studied its own leverage with the cold patience of someone playing a game that most of its adversaries don't fully understand. Rome understood that controlling the grain supply meant controlling the empire. Britain understood that controlling coal meant controlling the industrial age. The United States understood that controlling the dollar meant controlling global trade. Iran understands that controlling oil, and being willing to treat that control as leverage rather than merely income, is a form of power that no aircraft carrier and no sanctions regime has yet found a clean answer to. That is the quiet, patient, and largely unacknowledged power of black gold, not the power that announces itself with flags and parades, the power that simply waits. That knows the world needs what it has. That has looked at decades of pressure and isolation and calculated, correctly so far, that time and geology are on its side. Whether you agree with Iran's politics or its conduct is a separate conversation. But the financial and strategic reality underneath those debates does not negotiate. The oil is still there. The Strait is still there. And the nation that controls both has made itself, whatever else you might say about it, very difficult to simply remove from the board. That is the dark, quiet power of black gold. And if history is any guide, it is a power the world has never found an easy answer to. If this gave you a different way of seeing the world, subscribe to the Fiscal Record. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.